Here is a plant that was already ancient when the Egyptians wrapped their pharaohs in it. A seed so chemically loaded that 1 tablespoon contains more omega-3 fatty acids than a 4-ounce piece of salmon. A fiber so strong that the first paper currency in the American colonies was printed on it. And yet, if you prepare it wrong, you're drinking cyanide. This is flax, Linum usitatissimum, and its Latin name literally means the most useful. Not useful, not very useful, the most useful. The Romans thought so highly of this plant that they baked the name right into the taxonomy. Today, I want to show you why they were right and where they were dangerously wrong. Have you ever cracked open a flaxseed between your teeth? That faint, nutty crunch. Almost nothing. A speck. And yet, inside that speck is one of the most concentrated lipid factories in the entire plant kingdom. If nature built refineries, flaxseed would be a barrel-a-day operation packed into a space smaller than a grain of rice. Here is what is actually inside. Flaxseed is roughly 42% fat by weight. Of that fat, roughly 57% is alpha-linolenic acid, ALA, the plant-based omega-3 that your body cannot manufacture on its own. To put that in context, chia seeds, the darling of the smoothie world, contain about 17% ALA. Walnuts, about 9%. Flaxseed blows them both away. 1 tablespoon of ground flaxseed, about 7 grams, delivers 1.8 grams of ALA. The adequate daily intake recommended by the National Institutes of Health is 1.1 grams for adult women and 1.6 grams for adult men. 1 tablespoon, that is all. But here is where it gets interesting, and where I need to be honest with you. ALA is not EPA. ALA is not DHA. Those are the omega-3 forms your brain and cardiovascular system actually use. Your body has to convert ALA into EPA and DHA through a chain of enzymatic steps, elongases and desaturases, and the conversion rate is brutal. Studies published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition estimate that humans convert only about 5 to 10% of ALA to EPA and less than 1% to DHA. Think of it as a currency exchange with terrible rates. You put in $100 of ALA and walk out with $5 to $10 of EPA. The molecular exchange desk is not in your favor. Does that mean flaxseed is useless for omega-3? No. A 2019 meta-analysis in Advances in Nutrition, pooling 27 randomized controlled trials, found that ALA supplementation significantly reduced markers of systemic inflammation, particularly C-reactive protein. The mechanism does not require full conversion to DHA. ALA itself competes with arachidonic acid for the cyclooxygenase and lipoxygenase pathways, essentially elbowing out the raw materials your body uses to build pro-inflammatory eicosanoids. Think of it as a molecular bouncer at the inflammation nightclub. It does not shut the club down, but it keeps some of the worst customers from getting in. But the oil refinery inside flaxseed does not stop at fats. There is another compound hiding in there, one that puts flax in a category almost no other food occupies. And that is where part 2 begins. What if I told you that one of the most potent phytoestrogen sources on the planet is not soy, but a seed most Americans walk past in the baking aisle without a second glance? Flaxseed contains secoisolaracericinol diglucoside, SDG, a lignan that, gram for gram, is found in flax at concentrations up to 800 times higher than in any other food. Not 8 times, not 80 times, 800. A 2005 study in the British Journal of Nutrition measured lignan content across 68 common foods. Flaxseed was not just at the top of the list, it was in a different zip code from everything else. When you eat ground flaxseed, your gut bacteria, specifically species like Peptostreptococcus and Egerthella lenta, convert SDG into two mammalian lignans, enterodiol and enterolactone. These molecules are structurally similar enough to estradiol, human estrogen, that they can dock onto estrogen receptors. But here's the critical part. They act as selective estrogen receptor modulators. In tissues where estrogen is high, lignans compete for the receptor and reduce estrogenic activity. In tissues where estrogen is low, they provide a mild estrogenic signal. Think of it as a biological dimmer switch. Not an on-off button, but a regulator that nudges the system toward balance. This is why flax has drawn serious research attention in breast cancer prevention. A 2014 meta-analysis in Integrative Cancer Therapies found that higher lignan intake was associated with a significant reduction in breast cancer risk in postmenopausal women. The proposed mechanism, enterolactone inhibits aromatase, the enzyme that converts androgens to estrogens in peripheral tissues. It is the same enzyme targeted by pharmaceutical aromatase inhibitors like letrozole and anastrozole. Flaxseed is not a replacement for those drugs. Let me be very clear about that. But the biochemistry operating in that tiny seed is running on the same molecular track. And for men reading this, lignans are not going to give you estrogen problems. Enterolactone at dietary levels does not feminize, it modulates. A 2008 study in urology found that flaxseed supplementation combined with a low-fat diet significantly reduced PSA levels and tumor proliferation rates in men with prostate cancer awaiting surgery. The lignans appeared to slow androgen-mediated cell growth without affecting testosterone levels. But here is what your grandmother already knew, even if she never heard the word lignan in her life. Flax is one of the oldest cultivated plants on Earth. Charred flaxseed fragments discovered at Tel Abu Horeira in Syria date to approximately 11,000 years ago, making flax cultivation contemporaneous with the very dawn of agriculture. Before wheat was domesticated, before barley, humans were already growing flax. The Egyptians elevated flax to sacred status. Linen, woven from flax fiber, was the fabric of purity. Priests wore only linen. The dead were wrapped in linen. The Ebers Papyrus, dating to around 1500 BCE, prescribes flaxseed poultices for skin inflammation and flaxseed tea as a laxative, the same mucilage-based mechanism we still use today. They did not know about soluble fiber or gel-forming polysaccharides. They just knew it worked. In America, flax has its own deep history. The early colonists, particularly in New England and Pennsylvania, grew flax as a staple crop. Every farmstead had a patch. Flax processing, retting, breaking, scutching, hackling, was a family affair, and the resulting linen was the primary textile before cotton took over in the early 1800s. Appalachian folk medicine used flaxseed tea, sometimes called flaxseed lemonade, as a remedy for coughs, sore throats, and urinary tract discomfort. The preparation was simple. Steep a tablespoon of whole seeds in hot water until the liquid turned viscous. Then strain, add honey and lemon. Grandmothers in West Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee passed this recipe down through generations. The Ojibwe and other Great Lakes tribes used flaxseed poultices for boils and skin infections. Early frontier doctors, including Worcester Beach, one of the founders of eclectic medicine in the 1830s, listed flaxseed in the Materia Medica as a demulcent and emollient, used internally for intestinal inflammation and externally for burns. They were right. The mucilage in flaxseed, a gel-forming polysaccharide that constitutes about 8% of the seed by weight, forms a protective coating on mucosal surfaces. Modern gastroenterology calls this a bioadhesive film. Your great-grandmother called it that slippery flax water. Same thing. But now we arrive at the part that your ancestors did not fully understand, and it is the part that could put you in a hospital. Let me start with the fact that will get your attention. Flaxseed contains cyanogenic glycosides, specifically linamarin, linistatin, and neolinistatin. When these compounds encounter water and the enzyme linamarase, which is present in the seed itself, they hydrolyze to release hydrogen cyanide. Yes, the same hydrogen cyanide used in chemical warfare. The same compound that smells like bitter almonds in crime novels. Now, before you throw out your bag of flaxseed, context. A tablespoon of ground flaxseed contains roughly 5 to 10 milligrams of cyanogenic glycosides. The acute lethal dose of hydrogen cyanide for an adult is estimated at 50 to 60 milligrams. You would need to eat an enormous quantity of raw, freshly ground flaxseed in one sitting to approach toxicity. But here is the catch. If you are consuming flaxseed daily, say 3 or 4 tablespoons, the chronic low-level cyanide exposure becomes relevant. Your body detoxifies cyanide through the enzyme rhodinase, which converts it to thiocyanate and excretes it. But rhodinase requires sulfur donors, primarily from dietary amino acids. If your diet is low in protein, or if you have thyroid issues, this pathway can be overwhelmed. Which brings me to the thyroid. Thiocyanate, the detoxification byproduct, is a known goitrogen. It competes with iodine for uptake by the thyroid gland. If you are on levothyroxine for hypothyroidism, and you start eating large amounts of flaxseed daily, you may be undermining your medication. A 2018 study in Food and Chemical Toxicology noted that chronic flaxseed consumption at high doses significantly altered thyroid hormone profiles in animal models. This is not a theoretical risk for anyone relying on thyroid medication to function. Now, drug interactions. And this is where I need you to pay very close attention. Warfarin and anticoagulants. Flaxseed oil has demonstrated antiplatelet activity in human studies. A 2007 trial in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that flaxseed oil supplementation at 3 grams per day reduced platelet aggregation by up to 15%. If you are on warfarin, clopidogrel, or even daily aspirin, adding high-dose flaxseed oil can shift your bleeding risk. This is not maybe. This is measurable in lab values. Talk to your doctor before combining. Diabetes medications and metformin. Flaxseed has a documented blood sugar lowering effect. A 2016 meta-analysis in PLO S1 found that whole flaxseed supplementation reduced fasting blood glucose by an average of 2.6 milligrams per deciliter across multiple trials. If you are on metformin or a sulfonylurea, that additive effect could push your glucose lower than intended. Monitor closely. Statins and cholesterol drugs. Here is where it gets interesting. Flaxseed has its own cholesterol-lowering mechanism. The soluble fiber binds bile acids in the gut, forcing the liver to pull LDL cholesterol from the blood to make more. A 2009 study in the Canadian Journal of Cardiology found that 30 grams of milled flaxseed daily reduced LDL by 15% over 6 months. If you are already on atorvastatin or rosuvastatin, this additive reduction might sound like a good thing, but it also means your doctor needs to know because your dosage calibration changes. Estrogen-sensitive conditions. This is the big one. Because of the lignan to enterolactone pathway I described in Part 2, flaxseed has real estrogenic activity. If you are on tamoxifen for estrogen receptor-positive breast cancer, or if you are taking hormone replacement therapy, flaxseed can interfere with the intended hormonal environment. The research is conflicting. Some studies suggest lignans are protective, others suggest caution. Until the data is clear, do not self-prescribe flaxseed as hormone therapy. Period. Absorption interference. The mucilage in flaxseed, that same soothing gel, forms a physical barrier in the gut. It can delay or reduce the absorption of any oral medication taken at the same time. This applies to everything: levothyroxine, metformin, blood pressure meds, antibiotics. The simple rule: take your medications at least 1 hour before or 2 hours after consuming flaxseed. This is not optional. One more thing. Raw flaxseed meal that has gone rancid is a genuinely bad idea. ALA oxidizes fast. Rancid flaxseed oil produces malondialdehyde and other lipid peroxidation products, compounds that are actively damaging to cells. Buy whole seeds. Grind them yourself. Store them in the freezer, and use them within a week of grinding. If it smells like paint, throw it out. How to use flaxseed correctly. Let me be direct. Whole flax seeds, swallowed intact, do almost nothing. The outer hull is so tough that most seeds pass through your digestive tract completely undigested. You are essentially eating expensive fiber with no access to the ALA, the lignans, or any of the active compounds. If you are eating whole flax seeds and expecting health benefits, you are paying for a bus ride and never getting on the bus. Method 1. Ground flaxseed. Daily maintenance. Buy whole golden or brown flax seeds. Either variety works. The nutrient profile is nearly identical. Grind 1 to 2 tablespoons in a coffee grinder or spice mill. Add to oatmeal, yogurt, smoothies, or salads. Start with 1 tablespoon per day for the first week to let your gut adjust. The fiber content is significant, and jumping straight to 2 tablespoons can cause bloating and gas. After a week, move to 2 tablespoons daily if tolerated. Always consume with at least 8 ounces of water. Store ground flax in an airtight container in the freezer, never at room temperature. Method 2. Flaxseed tea for digestive soothing. Place 1 tablespoon of whole flax seeds in 1 cup of water at room temperature. Let it sit for 8 to 12 hours. Overnight is ideal. The seeds will produce a thick, mucilaginous liquid. Strain out the seeds and drink the gel. This is the Appalachian flaxseed lemonade method, minus the lemon and honey. Add those if you want. The mucilage coats the esophageal and gastric lining and can soothe acid reflux and mild gastritis. Note: this method delivers the soluble fiber, but not the full lignan or ALA content, since you are discarding the seeds. Method 3. Flaxseed oil. For concentrated ALA, 1 teaspoon of cold-pressed flaxseed oil delivers approximately 2.4 grams of ALA, more than a tablespoon of ground seed. Use it as a salad dressing or add it to food after cooking. Never heat flaxseed oil. Its smoke point is around 225 degrees Fahrenheit, and ALA degrades rapidly with heat. Once opened, refrigerate and use within 6 to 8 weeks. If it tastes bitter or smells like drying paint, it is rancid. Throw it out. Method 4. Flaxseed egg replacement for baking. Mix 1 tablespoon of ground flaxseed with 3 tablespoons of water. Let it sit for 5 minutes until it gels. This replaces 1 egg in most baking recipes. You still get the fiber, some ALA, and the lignans, and it works surprisingly well in muffins, pancakes, and quick breads. Temperature note. Some of you will ask whether baking destroys the nutrients. Here is what we know. ALA is heat sensitive, but a 2007 study in the Journal of Food Science found that baking muffins with ground flaxseed at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 20 minutes did not significantly reduce ALA content. The seed's matrix appears to protect the oil during moderate baking. Deep frying, different story. Don't. Dosage ceiling. Do not exceed 5 tablespoons of ground flaxseed per day. Above that level, cyanogenic glycoside exposure enters a range where chronic effects become plausible, and the gut disruption from excess fiber undermines any benefit. So here it is, flax, a plant so old it predates recorded agriculture. A seed so chemically loaded it runs its own omega-3 refinery, its own estrogen regulation system, and its own cyanide defense mechanism, all in a package smaller than a peppercorn. Your ancestors wore it, were buried in it, and made medicine from it for thousands of years. Modern science has confirmed most of what they knew, and added a few warnings they desperately needed. Flax is not a miracle. It is not a replacement for your statin, your metformin, or your levothyroxine. It is a tool, a remarkably versatile one, that operates on the same biochemical pathways as some of the most expensive pharmaceuticals in your medicine cabinet. Used correctly, ground fresh, taken with water, separated from your medications by at least an hour, it is one of the most cost-effective additions you can make to your daily routine. A 5-pound bag of whole flaxseed costs about $8 and lasts a month. Used carelessly, rancid oil, no medication spacing, excessive doses, ignored thyroid interactions, it becomes another cautionary tale in a long list of natural things that hurt people who trusted them without understanding them. Everything is poison. Everything is medicine. The dose makes the difference. Next weekend, we open the archive on wormwood, the bitter green ghost behind absinthe, ancient parasite treatments, and one of the most controversial anti-malarial drugs ever discovered.